Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
I've never had a microphone. There it goes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
There we go. Okay. I don't know what
I did to fix it, but I'm not going to ask any questions. The technology gods do give me headaches from time to time. Welcome to the show, Professor Halsey.
Well, thank you so much, Carl, for having me. Sorry for that little glitch there, but yeah, as you say, we're up and running now. Nice to be here.
So this research that you recently published, you're the lead author, and you recently published a paper, and I want to read the paper because it's really interesting. The paper, the heading of the press release was "Cruel Twist: Exercise reduces calories burned at rest in individuals with obesity." But it wasn't just individuals with obesity, right? It was anybody with a higher BMI, and even some older individuals seem to do this.
Yeah, Carl, that's absolutely right. This isn't a story about obesity per se. I want to be clear from the start about that. This is a physiological phenomenon about our energy expenditure that appears to affect everyone. Maybe to varying degrees, that's almost inevitable, but appears to affect everyone. And it concerns an idea that we're calling, well, and it has been called before, energy compensation. So this is the concept that the body, if you like, behind the scenes, unknown to us, deep down inside, runs a pretty controlled energy budget. It's a little bit like a fiscal budget, like a government's finances. Okay, let's say the government says,
No, don't use the government. Use a person's household, because the government spends more money than they make. So let's use household.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, we won't. Yeah, governments aren't a good example for many things, are they? So let's go with a household. So let's say the household. It's been a big August. There's been able to go on a holiday. Let's forget COVID, right? It's been a good holiday. They've spent a lot of money on holiday, had a lot of fun. But then they're looking at the money left at the end of the day, counting the nickels, and seeing there's not much left. So they might rein in expenditure on other things. Okay, maybe they don't buy some presents for the children, or maybe they're a little bit tighter when they go to the supermarket when it comes to the food that they get, and so spending more on one budget, spending less on another. And this is a very good analogy for how our bodies work.
Now, I got to ask you a question, Professor Halsey. These are evolutionary gifts we're looking at here. From the standpoint of food was not always a certainty like it is today. We are more protected against famine than we are feast times. We can see that in obese individuals. So is it fair to say that these corrections that are made by the body are actually protective?
Well, I think you're spot on. I mean, we can't prove that, but it looks likely that this is an evolutionary adaptation. So yeah, back in the day, cave dwelling, hunter-gatherers, this kind of general idea before Walmart, is it? And these sort of things. Okay. When food was less abundant and less consistent.
Right.
The body was designed to say, look, if there are periods where we're having to work harder, maybe looking harder for food, maybe it's the time of year when the ground's harder work to get across, something like this, and energy expenditure per day is going up because activity levels are going up, because physical work is greater. And the body's saying, well, hang on a minute, I'm burning more calories day by day. There's a risk here that I'm going to start to lose weight. This could get risky for me. I want to protect against that. So it says, okay, I'm spending a lot on that activity budget in terms of energy expenditure, spending a lot on walking around or whatever it is. So I'm going to spend less on other things to probably partly rather than fully compensate for that. So that means at the end of the day, each day, although activity's gone up quite a lot, and so activity energy expenditure has gone up quite a lot, daily energy expenditure has gone up less than you would think, because the body's reining in other costs. Now, in the past, that's probably a good thing. Okay, it's damage limitation during periods when we're struggling to find food and we're working hard. These days, the majority of us, not everyone, of course, but the majority of us are fortunate enough that we can pop into the shop, the store, and get some food when we're hungry. And of course, these days, high calorie density food is incredibly cheap, so we can get a lot of calories in very, very cheaply. So these days, it's kind of, maybe it works against us, because let's say we've had a great Christmas and we've ate well We put on a few pounds and we're thinking, right, it's January. I'm going to start that health kick. Part of this is I'm going to go jogging every evening in the park after work, or something like this. And we think that let's say we've got a Fitbit or a Polar Watch or some application on our phone that tells us we're burning 300 calories from our jog around the park. Forget whether that's accurate or not. Let's assume it is. So it's 300 calories. We go to bed that evening. We're very pleased with ourselves because we think I've burned 300 more calories today than I normally do because I've done my normal day's stuff. Plus, I've done this run in the park. So I've burned 300 extra calories. Well, that's probably true for a little while, a few days, maybe even a few weeks. But it looks like any longer than that, and the body starts to adjust. It starts, hang on a minute, there's this extra activity going on. You're burning a lot of calories. I'm going to ratchet that back by reducing the budgets in other areas of the body's physiology. Right. So unfortunately, at the end of the day, when we go to bed, although we burn 300 calories doing the jog, and that's quite a good jog actually, we haven't burned 300 extra calories. It's somewhat less than that.
And actually, the body is going to continue to adjust to compensate for the key. So, okay, I have lots of questions, and I don't want to jump too far ahead. So let's talk about the design of the study. How many subjects were in the study, and how did you assess their resting metabolic rate and how it changed or didn't change after exercise?
Okay, so this wasn't a design study, which in a sense is not ideal. What it was a survey in hindsight. What does that mean? So over the years, since about the 1980s, there have been a number of studies undertaken all over the world, predominantly North America and Europe, as is often the case, but also places like China, Japan, some other places, where the daily energy expenditure of people has been measured. So studies measuring people's daily energy expenditure for all sorts of reasons. And at the same time, most of these studies have also measured what we call basal metabolic rate, somewhat akin to your metabolic rate, your energy expenditure when you're at rest, when you're lying down. Maybe when you're asleep is quite a good notion, right? You're basically doing as little as you possibly can be when you're sleeping, but your body's still burning some energy. So there's been data amassed since about the 1980s, looking at people's daily energy expenditure and basal metabolic rate across a range of studies. Now, a group of scientists who are really on top of this got together and pulled together a lot of these studies into a database and effectively said, hey, if there's people out there that have got some good questions and we haven't already thought of them, send them in to us. And if we like it, we'll let you access our database. So essentially, that's what I and my good colleague, Dr. Vincent Caro at the University of Ottawa, who's the other lead author on the paper, that's what we did. We basically sent an application saying, we've got an idea. And what it was simply this. We said, look, if you can give us these daily energy expenditures for these well over 1,000 people around the world, and their basal metabolic rates, basically their sleeping metabolic rates. You can give us those data. We can correlate those against each other. Actually, the fundamental stats is quite simple. You correlate them against each other. And how they correlate will give us an insight into how the body manages its energy stores. What we could see from the analysis was that as people's, or in cases where people's activity energy expenditure, so the energy they expended being active, as that amount increased, basal metabolic rate, the energy spent on all these background things that aren't to do with moving around but are important to staying alive, basal metabolic rate decreased. So we could see some compensation going on in situations where activity energy expenditure was higher, basal energy expenditure was lower. That's the crux of it.
Okay. So did you have any blood work at all to review, to look back at of these individuals?
No. I mean, all we looked at was a measure called doubly labeled water, which is a measure of daily energy expenditure.
And doubly labeled water, did they actually drink deuterated water? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. That's absolutely correct.
Okay.
And then you take measurements from them. Well, you can take measurements through urine. You can take it from blood as well. I didn't do that work. And what you do is you see the rate of washout of the isotopic hydrogen, the isotopic oxygen, and the difference between them, to cut a long story short, gives you metabolic rate of the individual. At the same time, we also have these measurements of basal metabolic rate, and that's obtained, basal metabolic rate measurements are obtained through something called indirect calorimetry or respirometry. And basically what you do, stick a mask over the person's face, keep them nice and rested, preferably back to sleep. And that captures respiratory gas exchange. So it measures oxygen being taken up by the body through the mouth and nose, carbon dioxide being released from the body through the mouth and nose. And again, that gives a pretty good measure of energy expenditure. So these two techniques, they're actually measuring respiratory gas exchange as a pretty good measure of energy expenditure.
Now, respiratory gas exchange has the ability to also show the substrate utilization, whether or not the person is burning ketones, for instance, free fatty acids, or glucose. Were you able to ascertain that to identify that when basal metabolic rate drops, they tend to burn more of one substrate than the other, maybe protecting body fat?
Yeah, that's a very good question. You're right, you can. So you just look at the ratio of carbon dioxide output to oxygen consumption to get an idea of the ratios of different metabolic substrates being burned. So those basically being sugars, fats, and proteins. And the slightly prosaic answer is there was no real change. So you're basically looking at about 0.8, a respiratory exchange ratio about 0.8, 0.81. So there's nothing particularly intriguing going on there. It really was about the fact that in general, and there are some complications here, but in general, when activity energy expenditure is higher, basal energy expenditure is lower in the long run. So a key point here is if one were to go for a run this evening, okay, and you don't normally do it, probably your basal metabolic rate overnight will be higher. Why? Because the body's recovering, rebuilding a little bit from doing that run. Okay, but if you were to do that run day on day on day, after certainly months, maybe weeks, the body will start to reduce basal metabolic rate. So crucially, we've got to look at the kind of time frame. We've got to bear in mind the time frame that we're talking about here. We're talking a long-term time frame for energy compensation.
So there's only one thing that's going to have an effect on this scenario, in my humble opinion. So weight loss follows dietary changes more than it does energy expenditure changes. And what I mean by that is this: something that we learned 20 years ago from the fathers of bodybuilding was when you eat frequent small meals, 5, 6, 7 meals a day, the body becomes, it gets into what's known as a fed state. And this ties back to evolution as well. If you're starving yourself, your body is going to do things to protect body fat, because body fat is actually a storage cell of energy that the body will turn to in famine. And so muscle is metabolically expensive. The body doesn't like muscle because it's got to feed it. Fat contributes back to energy production. And so we know that when bodybuilders start eating 5 or 6 meals a day, people are astonished. How could you lose body fat and be eating so much? Because the body then is willing to compensate with basal metabolic rate. It's saying, oh, we live in a world of abundance. We get all the food. We're really never hungry. We can get rid of body fat now. And that phenomenon is played out every single time. No one's done any studies on this, but this is common knowledge within the bodybuilding community. If you eat 1 or 2 meals a day, you will never get paper thin skin. But if you eat 5 or 6 meals a day, same total calories for the day, the body will start to give up body fat. So that's one thing I want to say. I think that because I don't want people who are overweight right now looking at losing weight thinking the odds are stacked against me. The harder I work, the more body fat I'm going to end up maintaining. That's not true.
Agreed.
And there has to be a compensatory period. Let me just put a picture up real quick to tell people I speak from experience. That picture of me on your left is me at 330 pounds. That picture of me on your right is 228 pounds. Now, this took This took the better part of a decade.
Right.
Because it took me 15, 20 years to get fat, to become 330 pounds. But all of us who are trying to lose weight often talk about hitting plateaus. A plateau is an evolutionary checkpoint where the body goes, gee, I don't know if we really want to give up much more body fat. What if we don't have food? What if something happens to us? What do you think on that statement?
Yeah, look, I think that's very reasonable. The body's very clever at making us maintain our weight. It's not particularly interested in letting go of what we've already got, as you say, but particularly when it's fat. We can beat that, and you've demonstrated that. But it's not easy because the body doesn't make it easy for us. And one of the reasons looks like it's this energy compensation phenomenon. But it's not the only reason, and is also not unbeatable. So I think these are very important things to mention. The body's got various tricks for controlling us. One of the things I think is this, and maybe you have some thoughts on this, I expect so. Let's say you get some exercise done that day, and you know in the evening you feel hungry, but actually you're pretty pleased with yourself. You don't eat too much, you mostly some vegetables and some lean meat or something like that, and actually you don't get that many calories, and you make it to bedtime and you didn't sit in front of the television eating a load of cookies or whatever it is. Great. Right. But then the body's got more tricks to play, and one of them is the next day it can often make you feel just that bit more hungry. Suddenly you find you've eaten lunch by 11 o'clock, and then you've got to get to the vending machine to have the chocolate or whatever it is. And so, you might win in the short term by, digging in, but then the body makes you gnaw that gnawing hunger.
No doubt.
It is tricky. It's like an elastic band that you stretch and stretch and stretch, but then it can pull you back in.
Yes.
It's hard to break the elastic band. You can do it, but the body's got some tricks to make it hard to do. And as I say, energy compensation is one of them. One of the things, Carl, I do want to mention, I think this is extremely important. I'm not here to proselytize about how people should lead their lives. I'm not a health expert. But I do want to say this, that it's very clear from the literature that exercise is extremely good for us, both mentally and physically. So although exercise may be more limited in helping us to lose weight than we would like, limited, no good at all. It does have some value, but the energy compensation can make it harder.
Yeah, if you're exercising for energy expenditure, you're doing it for the wrong reason. Energy expenditure and energy balance should be achieved by what you eat more than how often you exercise. That's just in my opinion.
I think that's broadly true. I think possibly exercise can help not put the weight back on more than it helps lose the weight. But it is still part of the mix. Maybe mixing up exercise can help. I'm not sure. But anyway, exercise is extremely valuable for our health, both physically, and I know this sounds a cliche sometimes, but it's really true, and psychologically as well.
Absolutely.
Human beings are designed to be reasonably active and to walk and stride around and see distance. You know what I mean? And walk past vegetation and stuff.
In fact, the outbreak of nearsightedness over the past 100 years has more to do with the fact that very few people focus on infinity throughout the day, where parallel rays of light come into the eye. So the crystalline lens is constantly being squeezed and squeezed. This is what ends up leading to misshapen of the eye. When the crystalline lens, the muscles that are the yoke around the crystalline lens, when they force the crystalline lens to refocus, the globe of the eye goes in and out. If all you do is look at stuff up close all the time, you'll end up nearsighted. This has been shown. There's a great Chinese study that proves this, that this is what leads to nearsightedness. So you're right. Looking out at the horizon, being in the sun, all these things that we would have naturally done. I want to put a couple things up real quick. This one fits nicely into the discussion. Dean Paulson's asking about intermittent fasting, good, bad, or irrelevant. Before I ask you to weigh in, I want to talk about something. Anthony Roberts and I were supposed to do a show recently, but he got derailed with his schedule. There's evidence that ghrelin agonists like GHRP6, and obviously ghrelin itself, which is produced as a hunger signal, actually are also signaling the body what to do with body fat. When ghrelin is high, when you're starving, the reduction in body fat oxidation goes down to almost nothing. Why? Because the body's going, and this is probably part of the compensatory drop in metabolic rate, although I think that uncoupling proteins have a role in it as well, like thyroid hormone. But when the body is starving, it doesn't want to burn fat. It wants to build fat. So it actually, high levels of ghrelin, which are seen in people who, and this is why I said to Anthony, I have never seen someone who intermittent fasts with single-digit body fat levels. Never, ever, ever. I don't care how much they train, how much they fast. Only people I see with single-digit body fat levels are bodybuilders who eat 5 or 6 meals a day, train and do cardio. They're very, very active. There's a homeostatic balance there when you're getting the nutrition and the body's not afraid to give up body fat. But ghrelin can actually stall body fat. So those of you taking GHRP, ipamorelin, and all these things, high levels of it will actually stop you from burning body fat. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I don't hear your thunder.
No, not at all. No, that's very interesting. I think my answers to these things, my suggestions tend to be fairly conservative and again, fairly prosaic, to be honest with you. And I think, there's always the next study coming out. There's always, and then people jump on it and they get excited. And we all do, and that's fine. But then people who are listening who want to understand, can they change their diet? How might they lose some body weight if that's important to them? They're always getting the next idea, the next hormone, the next plan. And I think it's very confusing for people. And actually, I think health research over the last 50 years, which is basically the duration of health research to date, actually hasn't been great. There haven't been enough big studies with big sample sizes, and you ask about sample size for my study, which is the right question, enough just big high quality studies to really understand the basics. This is why recently, so I'm just slightly going off topic, but I'll pull it back. This is why until recently we were being told to take most fats out of our diets, and now we're being told actually fat isn't the problem, and then people are saying a sugar's the problem, etc. And we just go around in circles. From what I understand, and I'm not the guru of this, okay, what I understand, overeating is the main problem, okay? And
sure.
and that could be overeating fats, it could be overeating sugars, because the body is perfectly capable of switching those two sugars to fats and fats to sugars, or even overeating protein, which is less common for various reasons, including the cost of protein, but it can happen. Now, in terms of intermittent fasting, or eating 5 or 6 meals a day, as I'm guessing you've done and experienced, obviously great results from that for you. I think this is a very simple answer, and you may feel it's a bit of a get out, but if it works for that individual, go for it.
That's it.
If you try something and it works for you, then you don't have to keep going onto the internet, finding more pages that say, well, do this, do that, take this pill from the pharmacy or whatever it is. If it works for you, my brother's been a little bit overweight for quite a while, and I saw him recently at his birthday, and he'd lost it. And he ended up, he bought himself a slow cooker, okay, where you put the bits in through the day and heat it up, and then at the end of the day you eat it. Okay, I can't even remember the details. It works for him, and hopefully it'll keep working for him, in which case, fine. So some people work very well by eating a little bit often, maybe in part because it stops them being worried that even though they're a bit hungry, they're not going to eat for ages. It can be a psychological thing. Some people find that they can not eat for quite a long time, and they're okay with it. So if that works for them, I think that's fine too, as long as it's not for too long. I think that's my answer at the moment. Nobody can wade in. Always be cautious of somebody who says, what you've got to do is this. This is the way to fix it. I think because people vary so much in their psychology and their physiology, there are some very broad rules of thumb that we can work to, which is that exercise is a good thing to do, which is try not to overeat, and that's not easy. Beyond that, if somebody finds something that works for them, they don't need to listen to anybody else.
I agree. And that's medicine should be individualized. Diet is individualized. Lifestyle is individualized. There's some people who like to be up at night. That works for you and you're aging well. God bless you. Go on with it. I want to take our first commercial break. When we come back, I have lots of other questions about other hormones that play a role in metabolic rate. And we also want to talk about the fact that older individuals seem to be a little compromised when it comes to post-exercise calorie burning. Stay tuned. You are watching and listening to Superhuman Radio. Please post your questions. We'll put them up before the end of the show. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
I would easily say that I am the hugest proponent you will ever meet to doing anything that will improve the quality of my sleep. And that's because sleep is linked to just about every metabolic disorder we see in our population today. One of the easiest things you can do to improve the quality of your sleep is to get a pillow that can be shaped into the exact form factor that allows you to get your best night's sleep. And that is MyPillow. I've been sleeping with MyPillow for a few years now, and I can tell you that when I have to travel and stay in hotels, I don't get a good night's sleep because I don't have MyPillow with me. Right now, you can save up to 60% off of everything offered to improve the quality of your sleep at shrnetwork.biz/mypillow when you use the code SHR. Or you can call toll-free 800-889-4938. And remember to use code SHR to save up to 60% off of everything at their website. Melanocortin. Every day, there's a new wellness trend. Eat that. Do this. Avoid those. How do you know where to start or who to trust? Inside Tracker helps you cut through the noise by analyzing your blood, your DNA, your lifestyle, and your fitness tracker to provide you with a science-backed trackable action plan on how to live, age, and perform better. Personalized one-size-fits-one recommendations to help you optimize you. For a limited time, Inside Tracker is offering Superhuman Radio listeners 25% off the entire store. Go to shrnetwork.biz/inside tracker, INSIDETRACKER, to save 25% off. Change begins on the inside. Hey, this is Carl Lenore. Superhuman Radio is the longest running health, fitness, and anti-aging podcast in the world, going into our 16th year of continuous production. If you have a product that you think would appeal to the Superhuman Nation, we can get you on the air quickly and inexpensively to help promote your brand. Join the ranks of some of the largest and most successful companies in the world who know how great it is to be affiliated with Superhuman Radio. Contact Dan Kapitsky today. That's DAN.KOPITZKE at superhumanradio.net to learn more. Knoll Creek Hemp Company's Delta 8 soft chews are the premier Delta 8 product on the market today. Knoll Creek's Delta 8 is produced from high-quality hemp-derived CBD oil, and soft chews are manufactured using proprietary nano-emulsification technique that ensures the Delta 8 soft chew will timely deliver the desired effects cleanly and consistently from piece to piece. In a space where at least 70% of the products fail to meet label claims and where most users of conventional hemp products are left disappointed, Knoll Creek's Delta 8 soft chews are a product you can trust. Visit shrnetwork.biz/Delta8. That's DELTA and the number 8, and use the code SHR20 to get 20% off your first order today.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where brawn and brains finally meet.
So I'm getting some messages, Professor Halsey. There's a clicking coming from your side. It almost sounds like when someone touches their microphone. And I don't know what it's coming from because I'm watching you and you're not touching your microphone. I don't know if there's another mic on your laptop or...
Can you hear it at the moment?
No. But I'm going to point, as soon as I hear it again, I'm going to let you know. Because someone just talked to me and said, I said, is it annoying? And they said, just a little. So we'll see.
Okay, I'm going to keep my hands by my side and let's hope that there's no clicking anywhere.
Yeah, there you go. So you didn't look at any blood work. So we don't know what insulin levels were in these individuals. We don't know what thyroid hormone levels were in these individuals, correct?
No, that's correct. That's all an interesting mystery to look at next. And there are several groups around the world, including in the US, Duke University, who are looking for monies now, applying for grant funds to look at what are the details of how the body energy compensates. Because interestingly, and actually I've just had a paper accepted on this, a review article, that goes through the current literature, which is extensive, and concludes that we don't know how energy compensation happens. I mean, what I mean by we don't know how is not only we don't really know whether it's, as you mentioned earlier, thyroid hormone, or is it changes at the mitochondrial level. We also don't know what energy budgets are being down-regulated. So we don't know whether, the equivalent of the household budget, we don't know if people are if we're spending less on groceries, or, less going out in the evening or whatever. We don't know what aspects of our behavior or physiology are being ratcheted back. So for example, are you hearing me all right, Carl? Hi, Carl. I'm not hearing you too well suddenly. Are you back? Am I back?
We're trying to back on. Okay. We really don't perform the action. Right. Can you hear me? This is great. Okay, hold on a second. Hold on. Can you hear me now?
Oh, hello, Carl. Yeah.
There's been nothing. We lost our internet completely for about literally a minute. So you were saying that we really don't know how the body compensates, what it does.
Yeah.
I predict it is mitochondrial. So uncoupling proteins and thyroid hormones specifically make the mitochondria work harder to expend the same amount of energy. And we know this because we end up producing a lot more body heat. And there was a study done on interns at a hospital who, when you're an intern, you got to pull a 48-hour shift. And so they looked at a basal metabolic rate, they looked at thyroid hormone, they looked at glucagon-like peptide, they looked at insulin, they looked at blood sugar, they looked at a variety of different metabolic markers. And what they determined was, after 2 nights of less than 2 hours sleep a night, they became metabolically challenged, their blood sugar went up, and thyroid hormone plummeted. And this was not just TSH, but they looked at T3 and T4. And what happens is when thyroid hormone plummets, mitochondria don't have to work near as hard to produce the same amount of energy. When thyroid hormone is high, mitochondria actually work harder. This is a misunderstanding. People think thyroid hormone gives you energy. It doesn't. It actually saps energy and produces more body heat as a result of mitochondria working harder. I have to believe that that's a large part of it right there.
Well, I can tell you for a fact that there is not a single study to date of relevance to energy compensation which has looked at changes in what I would call mitochondrial efficiency. So I'm not a biochemist. So once we get deep into the cells, my understanding is limited. However, when a scientist measures, when researchers measure metabolic rate, so daily metabolic rate we were talking about earlier, or basal metabolic rate, we talked a little bit about the fact that that's normally done by measuring respiratory gas exchange, so oxygen uptake or carbon dioxide output. Now, those respiratory gases couple pretty closely with actual energy expenditure of the body, the use of ATP, as it's called, the packaging of energy that the body is able to use. However, it can uncouple. In other words, sometimes oxygen levels can be high when ATP use is low, and vice versa. So we're measuring oxygen consumption, or we're measuring carbon dioxide production, and we think we're getting a nice consistent handle on energy expenditure. But if mitochondrial efficiency changes, then our measurement of oxygen consumption or carbon dioxide is no longer a good measure of energy expenditure. And what I mean by mitochondrial efficiency is the amount of oxygen that the mitochondria are using to produce a certain amount of energy. So the mitochondria could, for example, become more efficient. Oxygen level drops, but the amount of energy actually being used by the cells is the same. So we measure a drop in oxygen, we think, well, the body's using less energy. It's not using less energy. It's using less oxygen to produce that energy.
Yes.
Right. So there is a limitation to the techniques that are typically used for getting a measure on energy expenditure because they're not directly measuring energy expenditure.
Right.
One of the things researchers need to be doing now, and this is not easy as you can imagine because it's invasive work, is to measure mitochondrial efficiency, because only measuring that coupled with oxygen consumption will really give us a measure of energy expenditure by the body. Now, different areas of the body may have different levels of efficiency. So mitochondria in the muscles may be different at a certain moment of time to mitochondria in the spleen or the liver, or who knows.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky business. So anyway, I agree with you that what could be happening is at least in part at the mitochondrial level. Now, why wouldn't the mitochondria be really efficient all the time? Why not be really efficient all the time? Well,
for the same reason that the family that went to the park spent all their money, and then when they got home, they had to start counting their nickels. When the body thinks there's abundance, the rules of abundance and scarcity are seen in every biological process in the body. For instance, if you take children with idiopathic short stature and you give them growth hormone, if they give the same dose day in and day out for a week, they see a certain trajectory in growth. If they give that same dose, but they do it haphazardly, maybe day 1, 6 IUs, day 2, they skip, day 3, 12 IUs, but at the end of the week, it's still 25 IUs. The children who get the erratic dosing see greater growth. The same is true from omega-3 fatty acid supplementation. If you take 3 grams a day, every day, the body starts to use those omega-3 fats for energy. But if you take a bolus one day and none for 3 days, and a bolus another day and none for a week, the body stores that omega-3 in fat cells, which ends up having a profound effect on inflammation. So we respond to scarcity and abundance, and this is also an evolutionary gift, in my humble opinion. When we have a lot of something, the body is careless with it. It's careless with it. Just my humble opinion. That's all.
No, I think there is something in that. So you can have the same amount over time as something, but do you receive it in a constant way, or do you get it in bursts? You see that with passerine birds. So the little birdies in the garden that, you know, sit on tree branches. So their body weight will change very rapidly depending on the availability of food. If they experience inconsistent food availability, they'll actually put on weight if they can. They'll
now,
actually
that's
put on weight.
counterintuitive. That's completely counterintuitive.
It is, until you think, well, why would they put on weight if they can? There's got to be enough food around to do that when they're in. But why do they do that? Well, because they worry that they don't know when the next food's coming along, right? So they don't want to die of starvation. But what's the trade-off there? Well, we believe it to be. It's very difficult to run a direct experiment on this, but we believe it to be that the heavier they are, the more risk they are of being predated upon. So they're sitting on their little branch on the tree. A hawk comes down from above, and if they're heavier, they will accelerate off that branch to escape more slowly if they're heavier. As if they're lighter, they're more likely to be able to escape the hawk, but they've got less fat available to them to stave off, you know, a period of food scarcity. And actually, this is an interesting point. I think humans are somewhat like that as well. So if you compare humans to other primates, typically humans have a higher fat level. So of course, again, it varies greatly between individuals. Again, you've mentioned that. But let's say an average 20% body fat for a human being. Obviously, it depends on the sex as well of the person. Whereas other primates, and particularly, the other great apes, so chimpanzees, bonobos, they'll have far lower fat levels. I mean, in colloquial terms, they're ripped.
Right.
Chimpanzees are ripped. Now, you can't tend to see it because they've got a thick covering of hair, much thicker than human beings. But occasionally you see chimpanzees with alopecia, basically. And so you can see their bodies and wow, they're in amazing shape, right? But they're designed to have a lower body fat level than human beings. Probably the reason being is that human beings have a higher energy expenditure on a day-by-day basis than do other primates. I
Right.
mean, we found a way to really rev up. We're supersized in the sense of our energy intake and our energy burn, far higher than other primates for our size, which I think concurs us some advantages. But what it also means is if things go wrong, so we can't find much food, our bodies are going to shrivel, frankly, faster. So we
Right.
tend to have a bigger buffer to deal with that. We tend
That
to
makes sense.
have. It's interesting. So we should have some body fat. It's good to have some body fat.
So the research that you did, was there a time span where we could say, because Dean Paulson puts an interesting comment up here. Fred Hatfield, who is one of the fathers of physical culture, he says that 2-week cycles. You have to, if you're going to try to lose fat, you have to do it in 2-week cycles. You dip down deep into your calories for 2 weeks, then you run maintenance for 2 weeks, then you do it again and again and again to kind of coax the body to come along instead of hitting it with this idea that, oh, I'm starving. Do you think that has any benefits?
Well, look, it might do. And sometimes I think these things can be psychological. I mean, it's very difficult to uncouple the two. Frankly, it could be, just a suggestion, that, it's possible to kind of, as you say, go deep for a couple of weeks and then give it a rest for a bit and just be a bit more normal with your calorie intake and then go again, rather than saying, right, today is the first day of the rest of my life where I'm not going to eat very much. So I'm not saying that is the answer, but I think that can be part of it. But I also think, as I say, touching on the bird example again, we're not birds and we have to bear that in mind. But you do see that the body will react to how frequent food is taken in, as well as the total volume over time. And I think there's more to understand about that. But again, it could be that some people's bodies react in a certain way to intermittent food, or going deep on calorie deficit and then relaxing off and then going deep. Some people's bodies may respond very differently to others, and so there's that whole layer of complexity here in terms of just human variability. Whatever theory we've got, whatever dieting idea we've got, which may or may not work, you then got to overlay on top of that the fact that two individuals will often respond very differently to it.
Yeah. I want to take our last commercial break, and when we come back, I want to delve into the actual percentages of change in total energy expenditure based on BMI, but also based on age, because that was another one, and it makes sense, again, from an evolutionary perspective. The older you get, the less likely you are to be able to hunt and gather very well. And the body says, hey, we're going to turn down the requirements for you because you're getting older. Let's delve into that when we come back. We're talking right now, Professor Lewis Halsey. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Superhuman Radio. Is there something interfering with your happiness or ability to achieve your goals? BetterHelp can help. They will assess your needs and match you with a licensed therapist. This is not a self-help or crisis line. It's professional counseling done securely online. They have a broad range of experts and are available worldwide without having to wait in an uncomfortable waiting room. Get the help you need and start living a happier life today. Go to shrnetwork.biz/betterhelp. That's better, HELP, and receive 10% off your first month of counseling when you use the code SHR. Remember those rectangular toaster pastries you used to love when you were a kid? Well, Legendary Foods has just made them better. The new cake-style tasty pastry is like nothing you've ever had before. With 20 grams of high-quality protein and less than 1 gram of sugar, you'll feel like you're cheating, but you're not. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off your purchase of tasty pastries. Now available in cookies and cream, red velvet cake, birthday cake, blueberry, strawberry, brown sugar cinnamon, and hot fudge sundae. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use code SHR10 today. I need to share with you all a revolutionary new wearable technology called HapB. HapB allows you to enjoy the effects of caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, melatonin, and muscle relaxants without actually ingesting anything. Yes, really. They figured out the unique magnetic signature of each of these molecules and recorded them. Just put the Happy on, choose the signal you want, and it starts projecting the magnetic signature of that molecule that you choose, like coffee for feeling alert. Go to happy.com/SHR. That's HAPBEE.com/SHR to learn more and unlock an $80 discount exclusively for the Superhuman Radio listeners. Melanocortin. I keep saying the number one killer is insulin resistance. Managing blood sugar is the key to living long and aging well. But we all like to eat starchy carbohydrates and sugars from time to time. How do I manage this? I use a product called Blood Sugar Breakthrough by Bioptimizers. This easy-to-take supplement is the result of numerous tests to find the absolute best formula for maintaining healthy blood sugar. Blood Sugar Breakthrough works to safely lower blood sugar after meals so that you can maintain a healthy weight and redirect carbohydrates to your muscles where they can be burned as energy. This means you'll avoid the worst effects of high blood sugar, like weight gain and advanced aging, while enjoying more stable energy, mental clarity, and fewer cravings. Go to shrnetwork.biz/blood sugar and save 10% with code SHR10 today. Redcon One's new BAR bar is the ultimate soft-baked protein-packed snack bar, powered by peanut butter. Perfect for while on the go to help curb hunger or sneaky sweet tooth cravings. With 20 grams of protein, use as a meal replacement bar or when you're in need of a high-protein snack. Eat a Redcon One bar as a midday snack or for fuel before an intense training session. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Redcon1 and use the code SHR25 and save 25% off these delicious bars today.
This is the Superhuman Channel. Evolution just got kicked up a notch.
I kind of look like Jackie Gleason in that picture when I was fat. 330 pounds, baby. Now I want to be 330 pounds with 1% body fat, which is interesting because Dean Paulson asks a very logical question. And this is something that I suspect plays a large role in, as we age, why we become metabolically less demanding, let's say. He said weight maintenance and aging. If you kept the same body composition, say at 25 years old, would metabolic rate still drop as you age? Muscle is metabolically expensive. We know that's why we actually have a protein designed to keep us from gaining too much muscle called myostatin. Because from an evolutionary perspective, having a lot of muscle wasn't really a good thing. You just needed enough to climb trees and do the work that you had to do. So there is lots of evidence that as men age, and women, but men as well, after 40 years old, for every 10 years, they lose about 10% of their muscle mass. So by the time, you're 60 or 70 years old, you've lost a lot of muscle mass, and muscle is metabolically demanding. Do you think that that's why older people tend to respond poorly to exercise, because their body is afraid? They don't really have the metabolic demand to begin with?
Yeah, Carl, I'm not sure that's quite true to say that older people respond poorly to exercise. I think that there's a few factors here. Of course, sorry to say that when we are older, we're not quite as physically capable. I mean, that is inevitable, that there is some degree of senescence, some degree of aging. But aging tends to happen far more quickly in a Western population, a modern living population, because not only are we getting older, but more importantly, we tend to do a lot less activity as we get older. People often have desk jobs, then they get the promotion at work, which means that suddenly they're at work even longer and they're very stressed, and they get home and they just want to watch some Netflix or whatever. It's very understandable. And
interestingly, the more successful you get, the more high-risk behaviors you participate in. So now when people become successful, all of a sudden they start drinking every night and partying on the weekends and doing all sorts of absurd things. And that's another issue for older people.
Yeah, they can be, and people are out of the habit, and then they're not meeting with their friends to go for a jog. They're meeting with their friends to go to the pub, which is not a criticism of that, but it's just the way the world is. So people in that sense age a little bit more quickly in Western societies. We live a little bit longer because Health systems tend to keep us alive, great. But we do tend to, if you look at modern day hunter-gatherer communities, there aren't many left in the world, but there are some.
Yeah, we talked about
you see, yeah, okay. So, I mean, a quick reminder, you got the 60-year-olds, they're still shinning up the trees, getting the honey.
They're raising their grandchildren. They're still hunting. They're still doing there's no retirement for hunter-gatherers,
No, I mean, that's right. I mean, they tend to die a little bit younger because things will get them, because they wouldn't be the cancer treatment, for example. You can't get, okay. But in terms of sort of natural aging, if you like, they would be measured as aging more slowly. And remarkably, body fat levels barely change through their lives. I mean, it is extraordinary. They really, really, in the main, most of them keep a very, very balanced body condition. Yes, muscle starts to go a little bit, but nowhere near as quickly as it does in countries like the US and the UK. So I would say the trick is to try and maintain a thread through life of doing activity. One of the things that can scupper that can put a stop to that, is not just the promotion at work and the going to the parties, which are great things in themselves, but don't help with exercise. One of the things that could be, when we get older, we're more injury prone. So, you start doing the running, you start getting fit, you think, blimey, I've still got it. And then, oh no, you pull the calf muscle you didn't used to, and then you're out for 6 months. So there can be clever exercises to do and less clever exercises to do as you get a little bit older. I think cycling, unless you get knocked off your bike, is unlikely to cause you injuries because it's a nice consistent motion. Swimming holds the body weight, but it depends what you like doing, to be honest with you. Some people's bodies can manage to run until they're 90. Other people, they just get sore knees before they even start. So you've got to find the exercise that suits you. The other thing I would say, it is clear from the literature that while body composition does change as we get older, although as we've just talked about, it can change a lot less than we think it does if we're able to maintain activity into later life like hunter-gatherers do. Okay, it will change a bit. But what happens is at the cellular level, energy expenditure by the cells does decrease. That tends to start happening at about the age of 60-ish. Of course, it'll vary from person to person. So it is a slightly older age thing rather than a middle-aged thing, although people at 60 are still middle-aged. But, from about 60, it starts to drop off. It looks like the cells senesce and just start to do less inside. I don't think we know much more than that about it. So there's those two levels. There's that kind of body composition, how much fat and muscle have we got and so forth. And as I say, that can stay more stable than you might think. But then there's that cellular level. So what's happening to whatever amount of muscle or the size of the organs we've got, what's happening there? And eventually, so people of 60 or 70 years of age, unless they're very unusual individuals, do need less to eat. And you tend to see people eat less when they get older.
Not me.
No.
I'm building muscle, baby. I need food. So Joel Green, who's a good friend of the show and a good friend of mine, says field workers are really good examples of aging slowly. And the reason it says Facebook user, Joel, is because if you participate on the Superhuman Radio Network page, it has some sort of weird security setting. But I went and read, I knew it was you. I was going to say so. Yeah, the old adage, do we grow old because we stop moving, or do we stop moving because we grow old, has been a conundrum for a long time. And I tend to believe that we grow old because we stop moving. And for whatever reason we stop moving, ailments, injuries, aches and pains, or just because we feel like we worked our whole lives and now we just want to sit in this chair and watch the news all day long. But there is something else. So talk about the percentage differences in total energy expenditure across the day with different BMI and age, how that played out. Talk about that.
Yeah. So right. If ever you ran a study like we did, you'd get slightly different percentages. Okay. So this is a broad range of percentages of energy compensation. But what we found was you're looking at something like at least 25% energy compensation. So for example, I'm going to keep the numbers easy for myself. If you did a really long jog around the park and burned 400 kilocalories, actually the body's probably going to compensate for that at least 100 kilocalories. So in other words, your daily energy expenditure will go up by at most 300 kilocalories from that 400 kilocalorie jog. Okay, it can be more than that. And we found that it related to fat levels, to adiposity levels. So people with higher body mass indexes, you would say, which is normally because they're fatter. Of course, it can be that they've got muscles as well, but it tends to be associated with higher fat levels. They tended to show more energy compensation. So it went up from 25% to 50, 60%, I think, maybe even 70% energy compensation. So unfortunately, that means that for certain individuals, and it won't be all individuals that are high in fat levels, but for some of those individuals, most of the additional calories they're burning doing exercise is compensated for. And to be honest with you, with people that are heavier because they are fatter, they tend to have low power output. They can't actually produce that much power because people who are fatter tend to not be so fit. So they might go to the gym, let's say, for an hour. Gyms are a bit boring for a lot of people. Some people love them, but a lot of people don't. They chat with their mate for half an hour because that's more fun than doing the exercise.
Oh, I see people at the gym spend more time looking at their cell phones than actually exercise.
Yeah, well, it's understandable in a way, but of course they're not burning calories while they're doing that. Then they do a bit of a jog or a bit of cycling, and because they're not that fit, they're out of breath quickly. And so actually the number of calories they burn is quite low. And so at the end of their gym session, unfortunately, a lot of calories burnt. And then on top of that, the energy compensation means it's even less effectively than the calorie burn that they have clocked up at the gym. So now what we don't know, and this is an interesting issue, is cause and effect. So do people with a higher BMI, do they show more energy compensation because they've got because they're fatter? Or do they get fatter because they show energy compensation? Yeah, we don't know which way around it is. Is it you have more energy compensation once you become fat, or are people more likely to become fat because they inherently show energy compensation? We don't know the answer to that. You also mentioned, Carl, age. Now, there's a quick story behind that one, because initially we thought, wow, we've got an age effect here, and it's really clear. And actually, when we submitted our work to the journal Current Biology, we got some fantastic anonymous reviewer comments back. So we're very indebted to the reviewers, really smart people who knew what they're talking about. And actually, we reran our analysis and accounted for more factors. And once you look at people's fat levels, once you factor in people's sex, because there are, of course, differences between males and females physiologically, actually, in our data, we didn't see an age effect. So initially, we thought that older people were showing more energy compensation. Having said that, and I'm sorry, this may sound a little bit confusing to listeners, but having said that, we did run a separate study that happened to be, it was what was available, Japanese people, and they were older. They started in their 60s, and by the end of this study, they were into their 70s, so a little bit older. And those individuals, on average, showed very high energy compensation. I mean, we're talking not far off 100%. Now,
wow.
I don't know whether that was because they're older, or frankly, even it was because of their ethnicity. We don't know, but it could be an age effect. It could be an age effect, but they were showing very high levels of energy compensation. On the other hand, because they're older individuals, as discussed earlier, older individuals can do a lot of activity, but they tend not to. And so their activity levels weren't that high anyway. So you get a really big range in energy compensation.
How about this question from Dean Paulson? How long did the adaptation take for the compensation effect to kick in?
Yeah. So we can't tell that from our study, but from other lab-based studies where basically you get people into the lab and get them to cycle on a bicycle for 2 hours every day, right? So prescribed studies that are unnatural but can get at details. You're looking at least a month, and I think more like a couple of months before you're really seeing this kick in. But again, I bet it varies a lot between individuals.
By the person. Yeah. And then lastly, the original group that you basically used for your data, these were all self-reporting, right? Like when they exercised, how much they ate, or were these actual observations in a metabolic lab or something like that?
They varied. It's a whole gamut of studies, but at the end of the day, what we measured for this particular study, was daily energy expenditure and basal, And I mean, they're not self-reported; they're measured value. So
Right.
It's a survey-based thing. You just let people run around in the wild, as it were, and then you take the measurements, and they are what they are. We don't even know what activity these people are doing. Some of them will have been doing exercise in the gym. Some of them were just mowing the lawn.
Right?
Right. I mean, but the fact is, you see across this wide range of people, across continents, ages, ethnicities, both sexes, in general, you're seeing this strong phenomenon of energy compensation.
What do you hope people take away from your research, both clinicians and lay people?
First of all, we can't treat energy expenditure as an additive model. Now, that's a fancy way of saying you can't just add up all the bits of energy expenditure you think the body are doing and say that's your daily cost. The WHO guidelines do that, for example. They assume that if you do exercise, that you can add that exercise energy expenditure onto everything else you've done that day, and bingo, that's your daily energy expenditure, and that's wrong. Energy compensation tells us that's wrong. So when clinicians are understanding a person's daily energy expenditure, when a clinician is saying, hey, I suggest you do X amount of exercise, they've got to understand, they've got to factor in energy compensation. And that leads into personalized medical plans, personalized nutrition, personalized exercise initiatives, where we can no longer, in a general medical sense, just treat everyone the same or just split people down into men and women or even young and old. We've got to gradually move towards personalized plans. And part of that will be, right, if someone's looking to weight manage or weight loss, what do we know about their likely energy compensation based on their sex, their ethnicity, maybe their age, blah, 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 their food intake? How can we factor that in to have a good idea of their energy compensation, to understand what exercise it is worth doing? Because you can do too little and you can also do too much. What we don't want is people doing huge amounts of exercise, just doing more and more and more, trying to lose weight. And what their body's doing in the background is suppressing all sorts of important physiological functions. I don't mean to end on a big sort of hyperbolic point there, but we need to understand that the body energy compensates and not treat energy expenditure by the body as an additive model. The body's more cunning than that.
Yeah, the body is very complex. I've been saying that for the past few years now. It's insulting to think that any one thing really makes that big of a difference. It's a concert of things. And no, this is fascinating. It's really interesting. What I come away from this discussion is you've got a tank of gas every single day. And whether you burn it doing 60 miles an hour or 15 miles an hour, it's not infinite. It's finite. The real question is, how do you manage the compensatory effects so that you can continue to lose weight? What can you do? What tricks? And that's where Joel Green comes in, actually. Joel has been, he's done some really, really interesting work about the immune system and body fat. Here we go. And this is him right here. He says, so much for the thermodynamic model. Yeah, exactly. Right. That just went out the window. But anyway, I want to thank you so much for making time to be on the show today. It's fascinating work. Very, very good.
Oh, it's been a pleasure to chat to you, Carl. Thank you. And thanks to all the listeners.
Take care. And that's it for today. And luckily, we didn't encounter any more of the dreaded technical difficulties in today's show. We had enough. We'll see you tomorrow with more Superhuman Radio. Thank you for being here today. Please share the show. You never know whose life you're going to touch or change, or who you're going to help by sharing a show. Thank you, Dean Paulson, for being here, and everybody who's here live and brings the flavor to this show. And we'll see everybody tomorrow with more Superhuman Radio.